But please, is that a Mateo? You literally just got me as a came, you know. How goes, sir? Haven't seen you in a while. Are you good?
It's Mateo, biggest bard in the essay.
Still waking up? Yeah, that's good though. You have a long day? I'm chilling. I was supposed to stream yesterday. Ended up babysitting. You have plans for the weekend? This guy says he was following me, but he's going towards Emily. That's funny. Haven't been sleeping? That's not good at all. Oh, I thought you meant like a monster with a toothache. Yeah, I hate those kind of headaches. I don't know. Honestly, it's just the weekend stuff. Oh, sorry, the heat that happened during the week that messed up my brain. I've been super dehydrated, more than usual. Bro, I've been drinking a ton of water. This is not even a lie. When I say like every day, it was a minimum 3 to 4 liters every day, dude. It's kind of crazy. Toilet runs? Not really, eh? Maybe like one every hour and a half, 2 hours. Wait, I'm admitting I'm a catch? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by I'm a catch? Bro's trying to flirt with me indirectly. Ain't no way. God damn. And that you almost got me there. Legit, you almost got me there. Welcome in, Emily. So let me just show you the chaos that I got up to. You'll see this little minecart rail coming from two directions. Pull up. What do I want to say? You'll see that minecarts led to this little monstrosity over here. So there's 3 villages inside of that water source with a trapdoor and a sign. The sign is to prevent the water from going out. However, there is a chain in mid-air with a boat on top and a zombie inside, and that's what scares the villagers into creating a iron golem. Now, I had trouble with the floor itself because I tried using glass and obviously it didn't spawn. Me flirt. You know not of this flirting. You do know of these flirtings. Ooh, it's a jib. Precision. No, I can't spell. No, I can't spell to save my life. But yeah, so what I intend to do today, other than just play Minecraft, is put a layer up here, have the next space prepared, and then I'll be building the exact same, like I'll be building this whole contraption as high as I possibly can on this one side, and then see how long that's going to take. You're having trouble with the shulker farm? I'm sure we can figure something out. I'm waiting for free cam, and I'll help you with it. I know shulker farms can be a little bit tricky. Since you want the mascot, I'll put the mascot in the head. He's gonna go chill right on top. Oh wait, you can. My bad, my bad. Thanks for letting me know. I'm gonna make him. I'll make him dangle in the head. You know. Let's see, we gotta thank Chipper for making this whole statue. I know I wouldn't have spent the time making this thing though. Because we can make him dangle there on inside of that spot. I don't know how to get in there now. There's a little hole there which I want to try and see what's inside. Oh, there's nothing. Oh, there is something. Lol, I need to light this up before more mobs spawn. Crazy. I'll make Jeb dingle dangle from here. Dingle dangle. I didn't pick it up, my bad. I'll pick it up in a moment. That's my bad. Yeah, I know. I'll pick it up just now. That's my bad. Thanks for calling me out on it though. Ooh. Yeah, I'll put a fence post here and then I'll make him I'm making ham. Yeah. Hang from, bro. What in the English dictionary is happening? I'll make him hang from the top. Oh my gosh. Nah, the water will stop him from dying. And then basically we'll just funnel the iron golems into that little space over there, which will convert it into iron blocks and bone meal the flowers. There's no way you just tried to flashbang me. Here we go, picked up all the glass. Anyways, welcome in there, Tuna. How goes, sir? How's GTA? I saw the pictures that you sent. It was actually cool. Man's finally got cats and dogs. Cats and dogs.
I'm being told that it's a skill issue,
Oh,
just
yeah.
don't die.
Yeah, you are a skill issue. We know that, you know? Peter, you calling Peter? Peter's gonna fall on my screen any second now. Anyway, so they will die here. Picture and 2 videos, yeah, but it was actually quite good. Getting to watch it from your perspective. Your character still looks better than mine. Bold as OSHA, bro.
I live in the shadows.
Thank you, AJ. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, look right here.
Flash me some more, yeah. Flash me some more.
Finally
I
awake.
love it. But yeah, slow, very slow right now. Only reason why it's slow is because we only have one section on it. You gotta times by 10. I need help too, bro. You might want to reach out to Zanfather. He's about the only person that I know is currently that would be playing GTA right now. Zanfather's not here now though. But check on my Discord. You'll probably find him there. Anyways, I did a little bit of resource gathering. So we should be okay on the creating platforms and everything front. Zanfather. XAN. Yeah, pig beds. I mean, that was like the very first double chest that I grabbed wool from. That and all the bamboo wood. It's like a W. Anyways, I brought a stone cutter as well. And the reason for that was to save on resources. So now all I have to do is just a half slab it. I know I need more glass though, like this is definitely not enough glass. Especially for this old platform. Zanfero? No, it's Zanfather, bro. What? I know it should be on this level. Yeah, huh? I don't get it either, you know? Look at Mateo. Hey, Mateo. Well played. Yeah, it was on this level. Now it's basically just glass. I know it was bright, bro. How do you not get it if you asked, bro? You asked who's the person that you play GTA with? I give you the name and now you don't get it. Like, dude, what? I just missed. I don't get it, bro. Yeah. Alright. So to spell Zanfather is XAN. You know, like Xanax? No, it's XAN. Bro played with him for so long, he didn't even know the name. Yeah, yeah. No, this is when you listen with half a ear kind of situation. But to be fair, I could have been more helpful there. Thank you so much for helping. I believe. Yeah, Zanfather. Then maybe it's Zanfero. I don't know when he changed his name, but I know it's Zanfather on GTA. Words with friends. Oh no, man. I gotta lower this. Enjoying the music too much. Yeah? Then it might be him. I'm not sure when he changed his name. This has always been Zanfather. But he's the only one that I know that would still be playing GTA. I don't know who else would be playing. At this point in time. Call him Zanfero, I guess. I first need to test this because I'm gonna be building this thing and then it's not going to work. Round 2. Where's this blocks? I know I needed. Was it 7 blocks? I forgot again. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright. One, two, three. Look at me. But did I seriously run out of half slabs already? Jeez. Okay. Alright, sir. Yeah, I believe so. I don't know, the thing's been acting up for some time. I actually forgot to fix it. Not bad. I don't know, I'm gonna get out of the situation now. Oh, there we go. I can just dig a tunnel, dig a tunnel. Mateo, did you say you had something to do today? It's the version that wasn't correct. So I had to delete the entire mod, delete the files attached to it on the game, and then reinstall it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. I hope it's sorted. I genuinely hope it's sorted. Listen to the vocals? Yeah, I'll probably have to give it a listen. Give it a swirl. The bed. It's a bed. It's a bed. Yeah, I need to go back and forth on this thing because we don't have 3 cams and I can't really confirm. So it's the same level. Then I have the chain. Chain boat. I just hear a bunch of punching. If it is that song. I see. Oh, and then I need 2 trapdoors. This one's a normal one though, if I'm looking at it. But what's weird about this one? Tuna saying that kind of stuff is like, what, bro? I've listened to a lot of weird songs. Don't underestimate me, sir. Okay, so I can officially break this. Oh, then, yeah, sorry, yeah, you're right, Emily. It is a weird one. It's a weirdo. Oh, I know the song. I watched you play with the song, dude. I forgot the game's name. It's a good game. It's not weird at all. It's just a collaboration of memes, if I'm not mistaken. Well, hello there, ma'am. Bro's just chilling. It is a mix of memes. Oh, collab or mix, it's the same thing. Oh yeah. Can I get a oh yeah? Chill mode sounds like a breeze. Absolutely sounds like a breeze. You've been up all night, that doesn't sound too good. So here's the thing, I need to get a zombie inside of this boat, which I'm kind of lazy to do. But I will do it eventually. I think let me first build the platforms, see if they all... how many I can fit in. You need a lot of andesite. I mean, you could always just get I think it's diorite and cobblestone. If you get cobblestone and diorite and you put them together, you can make andesite on the crafting table. Sign. Itchy nose. Did I not bring signs? Yeah, well, I'm so smart. I'm genuinely so smart. The polish and the site you can buy. You don't have to make that, you can just buy it. FPS drops for my game, yeah. I've got a lot of redstone and a bunch of entities in the area. Normally I turn it off for stream. Then people don't focus on it because I hyperfixate on it every time as well. That might just be a bitrate issue. Nothing I can do about that. Chunk loaders, that too, yeah. Do I need pink ones? No. I'm just gonna keep it yellow. Keep it yellow. I think that should work. I think. But I get the feeling that the villages are too close to each other. You still haven't had any issues. It's actually a good thing though. I get the feeling that this iron golem will be spawning on the platform above it and not the one below. Because, hear me out, these villagers, when they get scared, will spawn the iron golem above its head and then it'll get pushed over onto the side. Whereas the one on top will then just go to the one on the floor above. So I think I might have just made this wrong. Taking a break already? Didn't I stream just so? Kind of odd. That might just be a timer that I have to put off. Let me check. Oh yeah, it is a timer. Okay, I'm back. Yes. So now the question is, do we test it as these? Because for some reason I get a very strange feeling that this thing is going to spawn. Oh yeah, I made a mistake. Nothing new here. How do I go one layer lower? You'd have to place glass. True. I mean, it's just one spawn less or one segment less. I need to place downstairs. No, it's just 450 less per side. It's not much. It's really not that much. I think I'm doing this right. Moment of truth. Oh wait, I gotta close this up. Now you see, when this happens, then I kind of get concerned. Okay, let's just continue. Oops. Yeah, this is where I'm kind of getting concerned, because how did I mark it out? Oh, it's one back as well. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It's because it's one level back. Ah, this whole thing needs to come one forward. Okay, so it is right. The half slab is in the right place. So this bottom floor is in the right place now. Wait, are you legit going to fly it up there now? Nope, nope. Oh, it's about to die. I don't have a lead. I don't have a lead. I don't have a lead. Oh, Jib just jibbed. I don't think that's how you're supposed to use that system. Yeah, when you try to fly, you might actually need to use scaffolding instead. The lead won't break as easy, but as soon as you use a rocket, it breaks the lead. Yeah, another jib. Why not just put it in the head? I get the... Lol. Or put it in the boat. It probably got burnt. Here we go. I'll put scaffolding up for you. Oops. There we go. Luckily we have infinite tags. Did I just turn myself into a villager? That I did. Oh yeah, I meant to break that. Why am I so bad at flying? I'm sure it'll work. Oops. Forgot it was a half slab. I'm sure it'll work. It's just minor teething issues. Nothing new though, I'll be quite honest. No professional Minecraft player. But I do try. There we go. So that'll send him right off. That will literally send him right off. The question is, will this work? Because for some reason they're not spawning golems unless there's a spot. Why do I get the feeling there's a spot? Open. Family duties call, bro. It's all good. Hope all goes well. Oh, would you look at that? Let's go get some cobblestone slabs. I just need the slabs. I'm being silly about this. Yoink. We go find that spot again. I thought I slabbed this up already, so it's not you. Oh yeah, it's you. You over here, sir, madam. Gotta break that. Put that there. Is this also not slabbed? Yeah, this is not slabbed. This is definitely not slabbed. Thank you. Oh wait, this was slabbed. Bro, what? I'm so confused. But okay. I got a head, dude. I actually got a head. W. That's the second one. Okay, farm should be up and running again. Should be seeing them drop down there. Womp womp? Why are you saying womp womp, bro? See, that's what I was referring to. Iron golem spawning on top. So I think that is too close. It might need to be raised. I get the feeling it might need to be raised. Unless I just put a farm underneath this section. And then it'll spawn him from the top. Using the golem face it with a sword. What? What? Huh? I'm lost. Oh wait, was this the glass that Mateo was talking about? I'm so sorry, Mateo. I found the glass. Okay, let me see if I can just stack these up again. Yeet. Party at the back, people. You should have jumped down and hit the golem with your sword, not shoot it. Madness. I am only wearing diamond armor. Legit only wearing diamond armor, bro. You are a madman. Let me just put the golem head on top here. Certain dominance. That we know it's all good. And no hard feelings. You wanna hang the grey sheep? I mean, it's Jeb underscore. I can make one for you. Or first put the sheep there, then I'll name tag it. I will name tag it. So this floor, hold on, this floor consists of 8, right? 8 spaces. That looks like it's 8. I'm terrible at counting. Ooh, that's not good. It seems like you're very bad at this, right? Bro, get in that water. Get in that water. Get in the water. She was. Then I'm gonna have to put a second layer on. Can never have too much protection. Yeah, this is what I meant. This is exactly what I meant. This is not what I wanted to do. Wasn't intentional. But now they're going to spawn on top of their heads. Should have been the other way around, you know. But anyways, as I said, I can probably just put another one of these segments at the bottom. That way it will spawn one on this floor as well. Shouldn't be too difficult. For now, we build. I just need to count properly. So it's 13 levels. And on the 14th, this is where there's supposed to be a gap. But are you not supposed to chill like that? What in the heck, doodle? Why is it dude just chilling? Get in that water. He's wilding. Bye bye now. Uh, Six, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Apparently, this is where the next one starts. Should I just do this back to front? I feel like I should. What I mean by that is place a block on top. And then a half slab. Since they'll be spawning on top. Oh man, I'm able to make that jump. I'll be able to make this jump. Oh yeah, I should mark this. Here we go. I get yeah, I agree with you. Like, I was gonna say, I get the feeling they only love to get bullied as well. But yeah, that's true. That should be number 7 then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But then again, if it wasn't for their sacrifice, then we would not be able to play the game the way that we do today. I think the world would be completely different if iron golems weren't used the way that they are today. Is it a cruel way of thinking? Absolutely. Do I care? Not really. Watch, someone's going to make a start a petition. Save the iron golems. Literally to trade. That's all. Why do I feel like I made this wrong? Oh. Yeah, so it's 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I legit feel. Oh, okay, yeah, the 8th one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I feel like I made this wrong. Like, entirely wrong. Like, this block is the one that's supposed to be one lower. I'm so bad at math, please excuse. But it can't be. Oh yeah, it can be. Yeah, I made it wrong. Completely wrong. I think I broke the iron farm as well. Yeah, your boy can't count. Oh shit. I mean, I was looking at it and I was feeling very concerned. The only reason why I was like, let me double, triple, like quadruple check this. Because it didn't feel right. Trust you got more than anything else, people. Meow. There we go. So this is the block, if I'm right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I seriously cannot count. This thing is completely skewed, but oh well. Oh yeah, I definitely did. Oh, you agree with you, eh? Could maybe start selling music. Hmm. You should publish them. I don't have enough blocks. Capillaries, light source, water, and then just to make extra sure, it's from the light. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 is the light. You never know, you might just make like the next summer sale. What do they call these things? Where you get like a hit track that you just need the 1, 2. I was thinking to make a second shulker farm. I mean, shulkers are shulkers. Is this really that off-centered? Yeah, it is off-centered. Why do I keep placing this the wrong way around every time? Well, not every time, it's like the third time that has happened. So the bed goes here, that means... Oops. Yeah, she's good at making music. Alrighty. But I mean, like with every profession that you do, you have to practice as well. So practice or not, it's still quite good. Oh, I didn't mean to sleep in that bed. Oh, I'm so cursed. If I have to die now, I'm very cursed. Hmm. I think that's right. Only one way to find out. Ah, I didn't put the boat. He touched the boat. Quick, somebody, anybody, scream! There's squirrels in my pants. Moment of truth. Ugh. What? What doesn't sound like a good idea? Here we go. That's a reference to Phineas and Ferb, I believe. I believe. Oh, I don't think I can make this jump, but okay. Here goes nothing. Oh, oh, oh boy. Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to make that jump. It's just too jumpy. Whew. Minecraft Pro, everybody. I noticed the blocks here. Okay, let's go see how many blocks I could save when we fix that iron farm. I couldn't save any blocks? Interesting. At least we're getting bone meal. Oh, did I break the system? Yeah, I broke it. Where's the blocks? Give me the blocks. Oh, it does the jib.
Liliana! Sunrise sent. I told my computer I needed a break. Now it won't stop sending me Kit Kat ads.
Cat ads? Sounds like a skill issue to me. Oh, my repeater broke. Anyone have a spare repeater? How did Kit Kat break though? Now let's read this message. It says, told my computer I needed a break. Now it won't stop sending me Kit Kat ads. Bro, now you wilding. Joke of the day, you say? Or do you have another one? I was wondering why the farm broke. It was just some water issues. Do you prefer like regular jokes or dad jokes more? Ah, it wasn't just. Ah, I'm gonna scream, bro. Please tell me I left the torch here. I did leave the torch here. All kinds of jokes. No, not all kinds of jokes, because I mean sometimes you get like these dark humor jokes that people like read too much into. Don't think you'd want that. An old joke? What does that mean? Old joke like myself. Yeah, now I'm a joke. Say I spell cup, then say funny colors. I think this should work. 339. That was the intention, no? You're telling me I should just be following direction? Since when do we do that? They are? Nah. Nah. A cool cap. Is this thing on? I don't know, I'm more of a fiddle around, do my own kind of thing. He's a Lone Ranger. You know what I just thought of? Instead of placing that like that, I should be putting a bunch of blocks like this instead. Because I still need to get the villagers up here. So that way I know where the next set of minecart rails will go. Or am I being silly? No, there's no zombies there yet, so it should be fine. So because there's no zombies there, it's okay for me to put that beam off there. Put it like here. So we know where the villagers will land. I want to get the villagers inside first, because getting the zombies in will be a lot easier. Okay, on to the next one. Yeah, there's no way I'm going to try and get the zombies in, and then as soon as one villager arrives and the iron golem kills him, like, nah. That's gonna be so much hard work though. But it's definitely going to be worth it. In the end. Hey yo, ad break? I should probably just take a break. You know, like the Kit Kat. See what I did there? No! Thought I knocked the boat off. Almost lost my mind. Alright, we take a break here. Do you think I have to do this 10 more times? Oh, 7 more times. It's actually gonna be interesting. Anyways, let me just close this off. That way I know it's safe. Hey, who did this? Was this you, Emery? Emery, was this you? Hey? Hey? Let me close this off. Oh, you get it. You grabbing the... No. What I was thinking is, instead of grabbing them from the bottom, you will make holes on top, like the same line as where that is. So it's a lot easier to just push them in, make a mini platform, force him to sleep, break the platform. Because remember, it's 3 villages each layer. Now to get them to go all the way to the top, it's not ideal. I'd rather just make a direct access, you know. So we'll have like a whole bunch of stone walls coming out of the statue for now. Sorry, Jesus. Poking holes in you. But once it's done, then it's done. I mean, we're already getting an infinite amount of iron, which I'm happy about, but I want to take a break now. I will be back. And I'm back. What do I hear, rain? You brought a friend? A sheep friend? Oh, you. Hold on. Hello, friend. How are you? Lol. Yeah, no, I'll. That. Doing all of that, it's gonna be too much work. I'll do the minecart thing though. I meant to see if this one, this section was still producing iron, or enough iron. Not enough iron. So that's 8 villages usually in one square, which will be 3,000, 3,200, 3,300, give or take. Now what happens when we do it 10 times on the one side? I think I should be able to put 10 floors. Yeah, they'll have to stay in the boat for now. Oh, I needed half slabs, that's why I came. Thank you. Pardon me. Oh yeah, I meant to break this block. Oh yeah, there's still this spot, and I know 1, 2, 3. Damn, that's loud. Tell me why I almost jump scare myself every time when I hear the lightning. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is the block, right? Yeah, because of the step ladder. It's not a scaffolding, it's a step ladder now. Then I need to break this block, jump on top, place this block. We should be good to go. Okay, and in my infinite wisdom, I went and broke this block again. Why do I keep doing this to myself? Over here. No, over here. Aha, light source. It's you, followed by 2, 3, 4, 5, number 6. Trap door, just open. Oh, again. Number 4 now. Number 4. The sign. 1, 2. I need to grab the beds. Before I do that, it is block 1. Block 2. Block 3. Why don't I ever just bring all the chains, you know? Can be so silly sometimes. You know we have a villager breeder, right? Just thought I'd let you know. Oh, I didn't bring the beds, I'm so silly. Anyways. All fun. That's good to know. Break, break, break. Oh. The beds. Slab, slab, slab. Oops. Slab, slab. Let me break this block. Oopsie. Visit your distant cousin? Yeah. You and you. Block. Go. Break. Done. Okay, now I just need to make sure I place the floor though. Floor will be on this level. The next level, please. Oopsie, little bit of a conundrum. But we can fix it though. Or I can just leave it as is. I don't think I can, but I'll see what I can do now. One too high. 2, 3. Crisis averted. I just need to put half slabs on these, else we're in big trouble. Thank you for sleeping. Wait, did I not count properly? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is 7, right? This is supposed to be the empty space. Oh, the boat is exposed. I am slightly concerned, but okay. Is what it is. Yeah, they still check the outside. That place needs to be checked. You know, I've built this like 4 times now and I still get confused. Yeah, so let me get the beds and then I'll break those blocks. Yeah, once I second guess, you're right. Funny enough, this is on the why this looks like, oh my gosh. Oh, the boat got pushed. Oh, okay. Now that makes so much more sense. That boat is way too close. It's way too close. Doing some Tokyo drifting here. Okay, this looks good. Hey, you're not supposed to spawn on this level? Why is there a golem spawning on this level? What? There's legit a golem spawning on the... Oh, wait, yeah, that's right. No, it's not right. What? I'm so confused. Yes, yes, oh yeah, that's right. He's supposed to spawn on that floor, yeah. Oh my word. I got so confused now. Well, we're halfway done. I mean, it's not exactly what I expected it to look like. Still looks cool. Beds, which are over here. Oh no. Give me back my trapdoor! Thank you. You okay there? Oh man, I'm gonna need some more blacks. Splish splash. Mhm. You know what? Let's just take a full stack. Turn this into half slabs. Half slabs. I mean, we're only doing the one side. Yo, Meta, bro, what's up? Welcome in. How are you doing today, sir? I'm gonna give you a shouty. Oh, that's why I needed the cobblestone as well. Cobblestone half slabs because I need to half slab all of these on the inside. I might need more half slabs, but I mean, at least the half slab is going to stop them from spawning now. To get a good view. I'm sure you'll find it. This will do. Will do. Yeah, so even the spots where there's light sources, I need to put half slabs on because the golems will spawn on top of it. Which I should have anticipated, but I thought the light sources will help to control the mobs from spawning at least. So we got one problem solved, but the other problem is the iron golems. Yeah, 5 of them up. Getting the villagers in won't be as much of a problem. Because I'll just use the minecart method, you know? It'll be so much easier. Yeah, I slabbed up most of the outside already. It's just these sections over here. It's just these sections over here, and then on the other side, outside of the statue, I'll have to stop the half slabs. But yeah, it's looking good so far. Looking very good so far. And we're getting iron from it as well. I should probably make like an in and out hatchet from the statue into the statue. I don't know, eh? We have yet to see. I feel like once I'm done laying out the platforms, like I just want to make the platforms for now, so that I can get a rough estimate of how many I need to put in because I just realized now the back of the statue I might not be able to fit in a iron farm. I might only be able to do the one on the left and the one on the right. The back part goes in, it basically goes in, so I can only do left and right. But I mean, 20 golems are still more than enough. Yeah. It's still fine if they're coming from the left and the right there. Because when I look at it, it's pretty huge. Yeah, when I look at this, it's not going to fit. I won't be able to fit a system in here unless I get rid of the whole back. Or we take down the whole right hand side, or the left hand side, sorry. We take that whole section down and we move it 5 blocks. Like we move it all the way to the edge of the statue. Yeah, I mean, 20 villages is, I mean, not 20 villages, 60 villages is still more than what we currently have, you know? Just this one side alone is going to be way more than what we have. We only have 8 villages running on an iron farm system at the moment. And if this one's running, we should have a total of 10. Plus the 2 at the bottom, so it's 11. 11 on the one side and then another 11 on the other side. I'm basically saying double or nothing. Get rid of the scaffolding. Wait, what did you say? Should be quite good output even before other side is in. Once wolves and zombies are in place, I agree. But I mean, if we just get the one side started, it's already going to be so much. It's really going to be a lot. We might have too much when we do the second side as well. But I mean, I still want to do it. Bragging rights and all. Yeah. I mean, I don't even think the split will be necessary. No, come to think of it, it will be necessary, especially for the amount, because that way we know when the one section is full, we can put a stop system to it. So, for example, if one side of the like the storage is full, for example, can have a comparator send out a signal, block off the one hopper to prevent it from accepting more iron. And that way it can just continue to flow to the 3. Well, it does already have. I think there's like 7 double chests inside there, so it should be enough. What's 3,200? Oh, the calculator. So it's 450 times 8, right? That's 3,600 iron ingots. Divided by 9. That's 400 iron blocks per hour. So we get an average of 400 iron blocks right now. Every hour, it's 400 iron blocks. And what's that? Divided by 64 to get the total at 6.25 blocks. Sorry, 6.25 stacks that we get every hour. Which is, I mean, 6 stacks of iron blocks every hour, it's a lot. But we trade on average, I trade on average 5 stacks of iron blocks whenever I do trade. So yeah, granted every hour we get 6.25, but still not enough to sustain everyone else. Because I mean, if I trade 5 stacks alone, everyone else probably trades 5 stacks as well. So yeah, it's always being put to use kind of thing. Exactly. I need beds and a boat. Since joining, that's actually a fair amount. It's not that bad. How do I check the stat? Let's see. Traded with. Is it called trading? I can't see your message now. Traded with villagers 123,200 times. 28.25 days spent in the world. No wonder I have like 400 hours on this place. Just a little trading, yeah. I agree. It's a little bit. It's not too much, you know. It's just enough. Just the right amount. I was about to put water in, but I realized I need to put the slabs in, and the slabs are going to actually do a lot better. Why did I break that? I'm so silly. That's actually a lot if you think about it. Since you've joined, when did you start playing? You started last week, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, you're already 4 days into playing the game. Or playing on the world, sorry. Why do I feel like I made this one wrong? Hold on, hold on, hold on. Hang on, hang on. I know you're here a lot. What, you short on blocks for the portal? What do you need? Yep, I knew I did it wrong. There we go. Yeah, but once it's built. But once it's built. You just gotta think of that, you know? You got a whole list already marked out? Okay. Oh, I never put water inside there. That would have been a fail. Yeah, we can send it. Not much I can do about it right now, as you can see. I gotta finish this one first. One project at a time. And then there's still full situation with the shulker boxes as well. Once I have free cam, then I'll probably build it myself. Where's Phil now? He still wanted to build the whole thing in the overworld, bro. Having to get that shulkers from the end into the overworld. Wild. You're gonna fall asleep? That's all good. I hope you have a good night's rest though. Well, afternoon for you. Almost. Or is it morning? Because I just realized you haven't slept yet. You pulled an all-nighter. Hey yo. There's no way. There's no I got a round of applause. The most amazing man in the world, bro. I have to give a shout out though. There's no way you're gonna stop me. Bro! Dude, how are you? Welcome in. It's been way too long. Thank you so much for the subscription. Oh, good that you're chilling though. Dude. You probably having happy moment now. I have missed it too, bro. I know, like that's why I sent you that message the last time we spoke. Because I was kind of hinting towards the stream stuff. Chief has been chilling, you know. Not much to do at this point. How's your December so far? Are you on leave already? You gotta tell me these things. If you want, we can even I can hop on VC for you. Listen to that sweet, beautiful voice, eh? Tears in my eyes right now from happiness. You started leave yesterday? Dude, what is like the timing on that? Madness. Like the timing is just too good. Leave, I need to put a block.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Not you gifting. Thank you for the gift. Thank you gifting thank you for gifting Meta. What have you been up to, dude? Like, I know we have a lot to catch up on now. Yeah, Major W to Wheat Picks. Mr. Weedy out of all people, bro. Like, I am so happy to see you are alive and doing well. So, just to update you, the Emily, Wheat Picks, and I used to play a lot of Fortnite with a bunch of the Fortnite crew. I don't play as much now, if not at all, because it kind of hurts. But sadness aside, it was always like a vibes. Ah, you chilling, dude? You genuinely chilling. Nothing new. My side, I had to renew my driver's license recently, so there's that. I was like, oh, it's that time already? Is it genuinely that time already? I had to renew my license? Nah, she's on mids at the moment, dude, so that energy is on the low. No, that too. Person doesn't sleep. Uh, just for a little bit of a filler. Emily Carter on the server right now is Liliana. She's one of those mates, I agree. Let's all go take a nap. A nice Saturday afternoon nap, eh? Yeah, tell her. It's illegal. Oh no. Yeah. Dude, you're making me lose my train of thought now all of a sudden. So happy to see you around, man. Yeah, dude. Like so many people are like, "Oh yeah, the legend is back, and we're gonna have so much good times." Like I'm like, I don't know about good times, but okay, thank you. People were hyping me up a lot, which I'm kind of thankful for. Yeah, I almost didn't stream this morning. You heading out? Nah, it's all good, bro. 40th? Hey, hope you party lekker. 40ths are usually great vibes, eh? But thank you so much for stopping by. I really, really appreciate it though. I'll send you a message after stream as well. And try and catch up. Whoops. Oh no! Don't fall. Don't fall. Bro, not this. Oh my god. Okay. Thank you. Dude, thank you. Uh, Wheat Pix is oh mad man. W gifted, like seriously. Dude, I thought you were going to a 40th. Save your cash, bro. Million times over, like a million times over. Thank you so much for the gifted. I genuinely thought Weedy said he was going to the 40th now. So I thought like, he left now. You're spoiling me too much again. But seriously, I truly appreciate it. Thank you so much, dude. Oh my gosh. I thought I lost the water source now, but I didn't. Lurking? Oh, good. Thank you so much for lurking, dude. Dude, I appreciate that. We're just chilling in the moment. I'm almost done with this one section of the farm. Once it's done, then I'll see what else I can do. Because I don't want to... Do I really want to do all of the villages and that stuff immediately? Like, maybe I should... You know, like, get the farm over and done with as soon as possible. Oh wait, did I give Tuna a shout out? I don't think I did. I'll shout it out in a second. Yeah, especially if it's just for the iron, because you don't want us to run out of iron. We're already running out of iron. That's why I'm so concerned. Here we go, little shouty. Trying to get at least I have like the pattern going though, because since the pattern's running out, I just have to do this until I run out of beds. Apparently I got 3 more layers to go and then that's done, so I'm kind of hyped up for it. I'm fairly hyped up. Must know when we're on cloud level. I'm still messing it up. That's the most ironic part though. I'm still messing it up. Platform. Block above? Oops. See, this is why I think I'm messing it up because of the way that I'm placing this. But only time will tell. So if I place this block here, let me just see if I can fit this in. I can't. Yeah, it's not gonna work. Because I didn't even place the boat in yet. Maybe I should just... There we go. And then I need to... Oh. Professional Minecraft player. Jason, bro, dude, it's been so long. Oh my word. How have you been? Welcome in, welcome in. Seeing a whole lot of familiar faces now. For real, yeah. You've been fine? Wait, you doing your finals already? Dude, time really is flying by. Do you have any plans for your holidays? Oh wait, your holidays isn't soon, no? Let me just share the emote that Weedy has given most of the people that's on the channel. Again, major W to Wheat Picks, like seriously. He's an absolute legend. So happy that he came to say hi. And then this level, so we can break this. Rivals, Fortnite and Minecraft. That's good to hear. You playing MC again? I started a new world and well, not a new world. I guess you could say this world's kind of old now. It's almost 2 years old. But I do still have the other world that you and the other people were on. I have not played on it though in a long time. I stopped playing when the server closed. Jason was one of the first people that I played on the Minecraft server with. Oh, one of the many firsts. Hi Indy, welcome in. Oh my gosh. I just fell because of the saddle. Welcome in. How are you, Indy? Yeah, that's one way to flex, you know? Like, oh yeah, I want to play modded, but my friends can't play because my PC is too strong. Yeah. Yeah, it's like a bittersweet feeling, but I mean, it ended on a good note. Tons of good memories. Oh, is that right? Yeah, that's right. That looks right, I feel. I don't know if it is. But you know what? YOLO. So if we take this, let's just go make some more. If you're wondering what I'm up to right now, Jason, I'm currently busy building a iron farm. But not just any iron farm. As you can see, a lot of work that needs to be put in. Yeah, it has been a lot of fun. I mean, we've been catching on so much nonsense. Good and bad stuff, like we're just vibing basically. That's all that it's about though. Funny enough, no, I didn't even build this at all. Ironically enough, Jason, I didn't build this at all. I should actually show you. You haven't seen the world though. Well, I'll give you a little tour quickly. Just go grab some rockets. I built that though. This little monstrosity. I don't have 3 cams, so I can't show you like in fly mode or whatever. But Chipper's building that, the mod. I built the creeper farm. And then he built the sugarcane and bamboo farm below. I mean, it's only progressing now that we have more people on it. It's been slow. Oh, random mutual PvP when we... Yeah, you fighting the whole time is the funniest. As you can see, we have the new shelves in place, but I've separated so that duration 1 goes on the one side, duration 3 goes on the other side. One of the first storage areas that I've built was this. So as you can see, Tripper's busy taking part of it out because we revamping the furnace area. There's a furnace area above, by the way. Oh yeah, that big base there. If you're wondering about the lollipop tree, this has been here since the server started. But inside is a whole bunch of villagers. We've been basically trading most of the time. And then we collect our iron over here. If you like the tree, yeah. All the iron gets dropped off in here. I'll show you where the farm is. Just over a year old. But that's the iron farm. And what happens is, I think most people that play Minecraft or that have made an iron farm before knows. There's the little contraption here, the killing system. So obviously you'll get the iron that gets popped into there, and then this little thing will generate the blocks. Oh yeah, 3,600 days. Yeah, so all that iron basically goes through, there's a little tunnel system that gets pushed into the center of the tree, and then it gets spat out through here. So this water source over here shoots all the items up and then into this little chest, and that's how we get our iron. We can go up from this side and you go down from this side. The very first wither that we couldn't kill survived about 300 days on the server before we decided to kill it. Yeah, he literally owned the server for 300 days. Yeah, they're fairly active. I mean, today's like the first day in a while that it's been quiet. It's currently very late for Emily. She hasn't slept all day. It's not big builds, dude. These are baby builds. So you should know by now we intend to make even bigger stuff. This over here, one of the proudest buildings that I've made. It's just the outside that looks amazing. The inside looks horrible. But that's a villager breeder. That little space there is the villager breeder. Yeah, I can fly over there. It's not too far. And then this will be the crop farm area. So Chipper's currently building a space where villagers will come and throw all the crops in. So they'll dump all the crops, and then all of that. Well, the first layer is potatoes. So all the potatoes are currently filtering through to the side. Oh, speak of the devil, there's a potato. Look at them go. Yeah, so all the potatoes come over here and then they get sucked up by that hopper, the hopper minecart. And then they get filled through. I don't think there's any more fuel in this here. I need to fix that. Told Chipper I'll make the kelp farm. That'll be the most ideal fuel source. Enchanting area, I guess. Someone else lived here, but they no longer playing, so I haven't seen them in like over a year. They started with Chipper and myself. basically not playing anymore. Let me sleep and then I'll take you to Emily's place. So Emily and Phil started like 3 or 4 days ago. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. With the kelp farm. Oh yeah, that you made that section. Let's not even talk about getting the heads though. That must have been insane. If there's space, yeah, I mean, sure thing. You definitely welcome to join. So yeah, this is Emily and Phil's base. They decided to move to the desert. Ironically enough, this is like the one space where it actually rains. My mind was blown when I saw it started raining. I was like, there's no way. Now that I have my voice chat working, nah, PvP is not the style, it's more builds.
Pink hair whipping in the wind, custom ride, let the games begin. Streets online, I own this block. Rev it up, don't fucking stop. Engine screaming, tires burn. Take the curb, feel the turn. They can't catch me, not today. Nitro Queen, don't play.
So this song was actually made by Liliana. All I did was I imported the audio over so that it's playable from here. It's a very good song. Speaking of, I actually want to get that Iron song, the Iron Golem song as well. I do want to put it on here. Oh yeah, you're most welcome. That was all really. He's an absolute G, bro. Really is an absolute G. Yeah, it's a W song. Gotta listen to the whole thing. You playing the Hogwarts game? Yeah, I saw it was for free. I was so sad. How many people spend so much money on the game just for it to become free? On that topic, Chipper actually sent me a list of free games, so I'm looking forward to it. I got a... Oh wait, I don't think you saw this AM. I take it you never saw for Onyx base. That dragon literally just fits right in. You have? I mean, it looks great so far though. Gotta thank Callum for that dragon. that backdrop, I didn't realize that it actually looked that cool from a distance. Like if I fly in from here, like dude, what the actual heckin'. Almost like it was planned kind of thing. That looks so cool. Dragon there with the tower. Just that whole view alone actually looks really good. Jesus standing here like, bro, what? It's like, bro, what? What you on about? Yeah, I gotta up my game. Start doing better builds. And not leave them without roofs. Seems to be the going thing for me on here. Leaving roofs not built. I think this is one too many. Yeah, it is. Give it back. I think I made this one too long again. Oh my word. Yep, one too long. One too long. What's the next project you maybe have in mind? Like, what are you thinking of building? I need glass, people, glass. Oh, this is gonna be so good. You see how much progress we've made so far, though. Oh wow, almost a stack of blocks just for that one section. Has it been? It's about 2 hours now in any case, so. Why not just build it outside, you know, like where the savannah is? So in this area here, I can probably ask him to build it where the village is. You see where the village is, and we're on top of that castle area? Or I can even help him build it here. Because my thinking process is along this line over here, I need to first dig out this space. So anyway, from this side over, I want to make a highway. It's basically like a highway going to and from places. As I'm thinking castle here or castle there. I mean, there's a million options. And I'm sure he'll choose a very good spot. But yeah, I still need to dig all of this out as well. I've been procrastinating now. But once I have a moment, like if I'm not building an iron farm, or not fixing any other farms, then I'll actually focus on building the highway. Because I even told Chipper, like, see these areas over here, these dark patches here, this was supposed to be the road that we were going to make. So obviously this is the road that people will walk on, and then there's supposed to be a sidewalk as well around the buildings. But once this gets taken out, then I can put another building in there, whatever building it'll be, you know. And then have a road in between, or like a passageway, and then the road will go right around the hill. That was the idea for this space. But you know, we lost motivation here and there. It happens, you know. And you just focus your efforts into something else, somewhere else. Oh, as for this space, this will be turned into a hotel. It's no longer going to be a storage area. So hence the reason for the smelting on that side. And then this whole area will become, so we'll have the fuel source and everything in that space, along with the furnaces. So that way we'll have a constant furnace area that will be burning all the time. What was that short on again? I probably need a smooth stone. More smooth stone. I get distracted so easily when I play this game. Yeah, working between them. Yeah, and then end up like me. I get so distracted with everything. It is kind of funny if I think about it. Like I allow myself to get so distracted. Oh, it was glass that I needed. 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I am 3 layers away from finishing the one side. But I do need glass. Such a satisfying thing to see. Yeah, if we do it little by little, it also adds up. Because at one point we were going to add statues as well. Never got to it. Oh, these guys. I'll show you. Those guys over there. But now, instead of statues, we're going to add light sources. I need to empty the chest. Here's Nahi, perfect. This is going to be the last of the last iron. Oh my. Before we get anything good. Again. Like any good rates of iron. Oh yes, I agree. Like how much better would it be once we get like the full system running? And people look at the chest, they're like, wow, like what? Why is there so many? And we just start trading for emeralds. We can make a emerald pyramid. It would be interesting. Like the world's biggest emerald pyramid or something. Just find an open space 4,000, 5,000 blocks away. What's up, Chipper? Welcome in. Glad that you're enjoying the complaining. Dude, you know what we should do? I feel like that statue should actually be slightly transformed a little. Like we should add a little life to it. Custom voices with him? I mean, if you have some, I'm down to bring it on. It's basically just a resource pack that I have to add to the server. Can I? You and I, we were thinking the exact same thing. We were thinking the exact same thing. Just spam. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. We were literally thinking of the exact same thing right now. Oh, they would curse at you? That's hilarious though. I wonder if it's like random. We should get that Indian accent. We must get the get the Indian accent. Fuck you, bloody fuck you. Bro, same. Same. Oh, it's just too good. It's just too good. Oh. Fuck you, bloody fuck you. Yeah, we can get a whole bunch. Oh, dude, we really should actually try and get that. Yeah. And which is kind of funny because I am learning how to create these kind of packs. So if I can fully understand like how to create the packs itself, dude, it's gonna be amazing. I can't believe, like, my mind is still blown. We were literally thinking of the same thing. Fuck you, bloody, fuck you. No, fuck you, bloody. Yeah. I'm not in a rush, but I give it time, you know. At some point, I will figure it out. Yeah, it's gonna be like rinse repeat for everything else. A 2 loss streak? What? What do you mean? What game are you playing? Marvel? Why does it sound like you're playing Marvel right now? You trying to figure out how to write mods? You're going to derange? What in the actual... Oh wait, there was a... I can remember there was a time Jason would never stop saying, what the Sigma? Ah, yeah, you are playing Rivals. How did I know? That's kind of funny. Hey, give me back my glass. Like a toxic relationship? Nah, that's never a good thing. To be in a toxic relationship? Never a good thing. I wouldn't still bother too much with those kind of games for me personally. Good that you're getting out there and you learning new games though. No, you don't like de-ranking? Dude, you should try and play Mobile Legends then. Funny enough, I actually got back into the game. Thanks to Tripper and XYZ, another friend of mine. Look at this person with the flower on the head. That, oh wait, show, give me the flower quickly. Give me the flower, please. I'll just show. Jason, you still, yeah, Mobile Legends. If you're still here, have a look at this flower. look at the stats on this flower. The flower has protection 4 and unbreaking, bro. Never gets old for me. Oh my gosh. A, a flower. Oh yeah, we made a stick as well. Chipper renamed his sword stick, so I turned it into a stick. No! Gosh darn it. So I basically just renamed his stick for him. Yeah, so you also have an OP sticker, oh my gosh. Ah, I left my goodies back in the chest. Come on, I got 3 more to do. I just gotta stay focused. Stay focused. Stay grinding. We're losing track here. Like, I'm so close to getting done with this. Minus the villager and zombie part. I mean. I know it's skew. Before Chipper comments. I believe Pointy Stick also has the same stats. Wait, you got a sharpened shovel as well. I'm gonna leave this here for now. Free up some space so that I can grab more beds. Oh no, how did I miss that? Hmm. Block, half slab. Half slab. Break. Is there any rugby or anything that's on today? Oh wait, I'm not sure if Chip is in, my bad. There's a silly question you need to ask. I should probably put this here because this is the next floor. Break this. Put this away. Take this. Put this over here. Open it up. I didn't do the closing part. I'm so silly. For that we need to break, and then this is the floor. Yeah. Thank you for sleeping. Nah. That's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Sorry. Terrible at counting. Now I can break this. You off to bed? Whee! Yeah, you should get some sleep. Thank you so much for hanging out as well. I really appreciate it. I hope you get a good night's rest. Oh, well, in your case, it's not night, it's more morning, afternoon. When I get there, I probably will be up for most of the day. I'll see how long. Maybe I can stream for a long time. I'll try and stay up as long as I can. So. But thanks again for all the help as well. I really do appreciate it. Ooh. No worries. Have a good rest. Sleep well, Grimly. Oh no. Oh yeah, by all means, you go ham. I might just take a break soon. Whap up, Pedro, 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 Pedro. No. Okay, that's a loss. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. Oh no, the clouds are here! Quickly, quickly, before it's too late. 1, 2, 3, and then 2 more away. Oh my gosh, I am so hyped up for this. Give me back my mouthpiece. Just put them next to each other. Can I jump on here without falling? Thank you. Jump, place. Ooh, ooh. Phew. Okay, great success. That door, open up. Sign, placed. Don't put anything in there unless writing. Yes, stretch, break, and hydrate. I already do like look at this. Half a bottle. Crazy. Not healthy for me to have so much water, but I really do need it, especially recently. No, the light source. It was the one true light, the only light in my life, and now it's gone forever. No, I can get. I thought I could get it. I can't. Hey, the light of my life is back. W's. How does what work? Help me out here. Help me help you. What are you having problems with? Oh, trouble, sorry. Not problems. Gee, sounds so dark. So if I put you here, you here, you here, you here, you here, you here. This farm? Oh, it's an iron farm. Basically, I'll show you. I'll show you a small piece of it. Let me just place this down quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Light source. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right. So I'll leave the rest of that. I need to still cover up that whole floor and then put down the water. But before I do, let me show you an example. I don't have free cam at the moment, so I have to show you while I'm standing close by. But as you can see, there's 3 villages on the inside. They're currently sitting on a block of water. Now what it does is, because the water is a solid block, the villagers will try to float above and always stay on top of the water. But because it's not, because they can't move off of the water source, they keep bouncing up and down. And that trapdoor over there will cover a part of the head to make them lose sight of the zombie. So as soon as they lose sight of the zombie, at night they will try to sleep in the beds. And when they sleep, they become scared and then trigger the iron golem that you saw over there that's floating. And that's basically it. So as long as they are 2 blocks apart, so this is 2 blocks, so on the 3rd block there's something that they would be on. The reason I'm using a chain is because the block isn't big enough and it's not small enough. You basically needed something for the boat to sit on, and prevent the iron golems from not being able to lock on. So as soon as they lock onto the zombie, if there was a full block, by the time, for example, they had to get to this point here, they would not lock onto him. And then sometimes they will get stuck on the block. So because they get stuck on the block, it will prevent more iron golems from spawning. So if it's an actual chain, they have line of sight all the time, and that's what creates this constant loop of golems being spawned. I made a small flaw though. The roof itself should have been raised, like that should have been 5 blocks higher. So it should have been, the roof itself should have been higher. But now what's happening is the golems are spawning on top instead of at the bottom. You're saying I'm yapping too much? Bro, you literally asked for an example. I'm giving you an example and I'm yapping too much. It makes no sense. No! No, it's not what I mean. Jason looks like a TED Talk. Funny enough, I don't think I've ever seen you IRL though. But yeah, sorry for yapping so much though. But yeah, that's basically it. So you see the villagers are trying to sleep. But every time they sleep, they get scared, and then that's what makes them float, and then there goes the little iron golem. 3 iron for Africa. Now what needs to happen is I need to put villagers on every single one of these stacks. And there's 9 so far. I'm 1 more away from creating 10 on one side. And then I realized now with Emily helping me with this, I can't put golems on this side because it's too narrow. So the golems won't spawn as much on this side, which is kind of pointless. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'll just place it on this side instead. So I'll make another farm here, and then there'll be another 10 going up. So you'll have 20 villagers on the one side. You'll have 10 villagers on the one side and then another 10 on the other side. And that is a total of 20 golems every 2 to 3 minutes. Yeah, I know, right? I found this through a Chinese YouTuber. Like, this design is so simple and it's so straightforward. Like, I would never have thought of doing this. I was kind of looking for a stronger iron farm because that one, though it's big and very helpful, it's not enough. We get 400 iron blocks every hour, whereas if we do this, it's 800, 900 blocks an hour, so it's almost double the amount. I initially was going to add 3 of these, so it would have been 3 of these rows, like on the side, and the back. So that would have been way more. I think it would have been over 1,000 blocks an hour. But there's just not enough space. Maybe I can put one in the middle, like directly in the middle from here, but I'd have to work it out. Like, I'll have to plan it properly. I was actually thinking like this whole setup over here, this isn't needed really, like this corner piece. There's a way where I should be able to manipulate it to a point where if there's one source in the middle of where the villages are and the water's spread out, it basically just pushes the golems out. But that's an idea for another world or something, you know. Back to not getting distracted. And that was my TED talk. Or chat talk, yeah, like you said. In W's. Thank you. You're too kind, sir. You're too kind. Honestly, I just want to put the last boat in and call it a day, but I know for a fact I need to move these villages as well. So, you see, now when I look at this, right? Ah, I forgot to bring the beds. Anyways, I'll do that just now. When I look at this space, there's obviously another 2 more rows that I could add. Thinking like, do I add another 2 more rows? Because I mean, it's more iron at the end of the day. But I'll start off with 10. I'll not be greedy. Oh, I can't place the water. I almost placed the water. Would not have been smart. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. 1, 2, 3. Oh, we're about to do it. We're about to do it. Place. Main break. Oh, I need the beds. So let's first do this before I get too distracted because I'm almost done. I was in a nice like flow state, but the distractions are real, bro. I don't know why I distract myself all the time. It's so weird. Like I can never stay focused for too long, which is not a good thing. Not a flex either. Yeah, that's why I kind of just try to stick with one game. Yes, I know it's not easy, but I mean, good practice, I guess. Do I need? Yeah, I think I can remove this one. Ooh, Chip is about to beat my ass. Why are you touching my build? I will beat you. Like, sorry, Chipper. I need the space. The space is for me. You have any Christmas plans, Jason? Not really. No gaming with friends or going on a vacation? Hanging out with fam? I know, like, for me, starting next week, I do have people coming over. Like, I have family coming over. Online and offline. You've become very social, I must say. Not in a bad way. Like, it's a good thing that you branching out, you hanging out with friends, spending time with family, and that. It's never a bad thing. It is never a bad thing. Is a calling under one. Lock in? I mean, rather lock in, bro. I don't want to be the one to cause a loss for you, you know? I appreciate that you're hanging out, though. You on healer? Is that like a good thing? I'm not too clued up on Marvel. I must admit. I don't know what it's all about, kind of thing. A few people already invited me to play, but I declined because I don't know. You can give me some Minecraft. I love me some Minecraft. Pretty easy peasy. There's a couple of games that a few people suggested that I started playing. I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. I don't know. I find it a little bit hard to adjust to new games. Carnage, how are you doing today, sir? Welcome in. Hi, Carnage. Hello, Carnage. Carnage, hello. Hello, Carnage. Bro, how are you doing? Though, like for real. Ah, I'm silly. I thought I placed the beds. I did not. I'm just glad the section's done. Whee. I cannot complain. I'm alright, man. You're like pretty chilled out, vibing, hanging out with people as they pop in and out. I've been I've been so distracted with this build that I really do want to get it over and done. And I'm so close. Like I'm so close. I didn't mean to sleep there, but okay. Water goes inside. The block goes on top. No, the block does. Oh yeah, the block does go on top. Half slab, half slab. Half slab, half slab, half slab. Break these two. Half slab. This is sorted. Oh wait, I'm silly. There we go. I need a block again. The glass, the trapdoor. There we go. And that's basically it. I believe that's the whole farm. What the freaking hell? Okay. Apparently we got lightning coming on that side, in that corner. That's so loud. I'm kind of glad that this is done. So anticlimactic though, to be quite honest. I remembered I just realized I should not have taken out all the blocks. Because I need the villagers to sleep in their bed as well. So now it's a matter of making a platform to and from. And then once this is done, that's basically it. I'll probably start from the top, work my way down. Because that would be the easiest. So right now, you won? Major W, bro. What's the ranking system like? Like after plat, what do you get? Bronze, silver, gold, Plat, Diamond, Grandmaster, Celestial, Eternity. One. So Eternity is like the highest one. Carnage, what are you up to right now? You say it's gotten better. That doesn't sound good. Oh, I can probably just Google it. I was just curious. Yeah, the thunder's so intense. Having lunch? Ooh, what's for lunch? Better not be a hot dog. Hey yo, breaks. I should probably take a break soon now. Back to Fortnite? I don't think I would be going back to Fortnite. There's too much physical harm that takes place, unfortunately. I know it sounds like I'm making excuses and stuff like that, but nah, couldn't be bothered. Plus, this is like my happy place. Chicken shawarma? Dude, chicken shawarma for lunch? I'm so jealous. It actually makes me want to. Oh no. I think like the most stressful part about this is the warden. That's about the only issue on this game. But even he's not. This is basically like a nothing. A dairy free? What? How do you pronounce this? I don't want to botch it though. Tzatziki sauce? I probably botched it. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I probably botched it, but yeah. What kind of sauce is that though? I'm curious. I am dying to know. Give me more blocks. I need more blocks. I should have used glass. Oh well. We'll get more blocks. Not gonna lie, this game's ambience has actually been up by a lot. It sounds so different compared to what it used to sound like. Come on, where's this level? The next level plays usually grated cucumbers with Greek yogurt, garlic, lemon juice, vinegar, and oh, dude, that sounds very nice. Greek yogurt, garlic are always nice together. Salt and pepper, but of course salt and pepper. You know, because I've got a lot of salt and pepper. The graze in my head. If that's what people if people are gonna be wondering what they like, Chad, how dare you? Yeah, it definitely sounds. It sounds extremely healthy, dude. Had frozen cheese pizza? Dude, frozen cheese pizza. Nah, you wilding. You need to eat more healthy, bro. Well, then again, I say that, and then here's me just literally binging off of curry for the rest of my life. Which is not healthy at all. Makes a change in usually getting takeaways. Wait, you usually get takeaways from work, though? When did this all start? Because the last time we spoke, you were always making your own lunches, though. Yes, I did it. Okay, so all of these are done. I need to just get 3 villages per row. Every single row, and I'm going to stack them up. And then that should basically be it. So, the first one would be you. Tripper, if you're watching this, I'm sorry for making so many holes. I will eventually rectify it. Yeah, I agree, Carnage. Putting it in the oven makes it taste a lot better. Oh no! Give me glass. Glass. Glass, glass, glass. Only a minute, bro. That should be in there for like 15 minutes. Why do you like cold pizza? Oh, sorry, frozen pizza. It's wild. I can understand cold leftover pizza, yeah, but frozen pizza? Or like pizza that hasn't been thoroughly cooked. Like, you gotta make sure that that cheese is melted. Yeah, no judgment though. You know, each to his own. I can be so silly sometimes. Come on. Crunchy pizza? Yeah. Especially with the crust. If the crust is crunchy. Bro. Kinda making me hungry right now. Ice pop? What's an ice pop? When you say ice pop, is that like a lollipop or some sort? Or sorry, like a ice cream? Yeah. Like I get ice pop because I'm thinking like a frozen lollipop. But in South Africa we call them suckers. Ice lolly, yeah. Ice lolly, we call them suckers in South Africa. That's why I was a little bit confused. What was I getting? I was lighting it up. I need the minecart rails that'll go back and forth. And then basically a 3-wide platform directing to the bed. So I'm actually gonna have to put the rails on one side, force them to spawn onto the other side, and then walk towards the beds, especially when it's nighttime. Yeah, this is gonna be interesting. Too many Americans? I mean, it's not a bad thing. Calling it an ice lolly. Maybe you like calling it an ice lolly. Like it rolls off the tongue kind of vibe. Each to his own, you know. America. Oh no, I can be so silly sometimes. Okay, we got that little hole there, this one over here. Never thought in my life 1 terabyte of storage would be enough. Yeah, the games do become a little intense, especially if you're trying to get these AAA games. You call it an ice lolly? I mean, no harm in it, you know. Ice lolly, sucker. What else? What else can it be called? Is there like a certain name that you would call it, Jason? Like I know because Jason's not from Jason's from the east. So I'm curious as to like what they would actually refer to an ice lolly or a lolly. What's that? The frozen pop? Yeah, what the heck is that in like translated, dude? Man's wild in here. But thank you so much for giving the name. Ice cream. I wonder how you would like enunciate that then, like the way that you would sound it out. I'm curious. For a very long time I used to love learning languages. Now I don't know, eh? My brain is not where it needs to be. I'm actually very curious as to like how one would enunciate it. But I can probably just Google it. Is it Salem? Oh my. Korean? How'd you know he's Korean? I probably botched the pronunciation. Alright, that's it. Gotta take a break. Close enough. Don't you dare laugh at me. I will fight you, man. I gotta figure out because this system might be broken. 1 poppy, 3 poppy. Okay, no, all the irons being created. Good stuff. Look at that. 2 stacks 22 in the time that I was streaming. That is like a huge W. Yeah, you literally said ice cream in Korean accent, but I'm in my brain. I'm like, oh, I didn't mean like what would you say? I meant like the enunciation. And then he enunciated it for me, but I still botched it. He was kind enough to say close enough, though. Oh my gosh. Yeah, don't ask me to ever 1v1 people. I'm so bad at shooting and fighting these days. Sir, your car's extended warranty will not be accepted. Please get out of my property. Ah, another one. Awesome. Get off of my property. You're not wanted here. Oh, that's how you knew it was Korean? If I'm not mistaken, oh, okay, so Madam's... Gee, that was so loud in my ear. No wonder there was thunder and lightning. I haven't seen this bunch in a while. Oh my word. It's been forever and a day. Oh, do you know what's ironic now, Jason? I don't know. Yeah, it's copper. That's vanilla now. I don't know when last you played Minecraft, but we've got the spear, and when it's daytime, the skeleton horses actually burn now. So if I'm not mistaken, those guys should be burning when there's no shadows. Oh wait, he's not burning. What the heck? Haven't been up to date with Minecraft since like the Caves and Cliffs update? No, it can't be, because we met after the Caves and Cliffs update. You and I met after the Caves and Cliffs update. Oh, but let me just show you. I put away... Oh, the zombie horse is now officially a thing as well. We officially have spears in the game. As of the 9th of December, we got spears in the game. So, yeah, you can now do little jumpies. That's called a lunge. Yeah. So you sprint, jump, left click, and you can dash forward or just do the regular. But you also have another one where if you hold right click with the spear, you hold the spear out. I don't want to kill my my ghast. Oh yeah, we got happy ghast now as well that you can fly around. These little buggers. Yeah, these are happy ghast. You put a harness on them and then you can fly.
Bone 5 layer is now following.
Hello, welcome in. Thank you so much for the follow, Bone 5 layer. How are you doing today? So I was just explaining to Jason that we have happy ghast. I'm doing pretty well, thanks. I've been chilling. Just explaining to Jason about the happy ghast and the spear. There's the Nautilus shell as well. Not Nautilus shell, sorry, the Nautilus. I don't have if I had, what's this blowfish stuff? Pufferfish. If I had pufferfish, yeah, it's an air jellyfish, literally. But if I had pufferfish now, then I could tame a Nautilus for you. Let's see if I can find one quickly. SMP joinable? Not at present, no. It's a private server that I've been running. Mainly just chilling with friends. And if they have people that they want to join, then they'd invite them over. The Nautilus shell, yeah, that is a thing. But now they've actually made the creature, the Nautilus creature. They've added that to the game. Who knows, Bone, maybe if you stick around long enough, I might be able to invite you over. Currently it's no PvP, it's builds only. So if that's your kind of thing, then you might actually just enjoy it. I want to see if I can find one. I don't think I'll find one here though. Maybe closer towards like War Mortal or something. And yes, there are 3 Guardian temples close to each other. Let's see if I can find one here. Because I remember seeing one close by. I just didn't have any pufferfish. I wonder if I'll find any here. Unless I wait till nighttime. Hey, those blocks of that. There's people's blocks just chilling there. There's a Jason. For you, sir, the Nautilus. I don't have respiration on my helmet right now. But you get this variant of the Nautilus, and then you get the coral reef version of it, I guess you could say. So there's one with like different types of coral on it. Yeah. I'll see if I can find that one as well. I think I mentioned the zombie horse. That's officially in the game now as well. But I have to wait for nighttime in order to show you. Oh, and I got a frog light on my head. Dungeons or Legends? I've never played that, I'll be quite honest, so I don't really know what it looks like. But yeah, you've seen the town. How? How what? You can ride the Nautilus, by the way. Yeah, it does look like a squid. But we have squid in the game, and I basically farmed the squid. No, it's not a thing, dude. It's a custom model. Right now, it looks like I'm not wearing a helmet, but it's just a custom model. Imagine placing stuff on your head. That would be wild. I originally wanted to place glass on my head, but it didn't fit. I need the resource pack to enable it, and then have it registered as a model. Yeah, you should see Chipper's pointy stick and Emily's shovel. Snail with tentacles is a tentacle snail. Let's see if I can find some here. Just have to wait a few minutes for them to spawn in. For a second I thought those were seahorses. No. I wonder how rare it is to find one of these Nautiluses. Nope. What's that there? There was something that floated there. Oh, it's just a squid. It's a squiddy. Wait, let's see. I don't see what I'm looking for. Maybe I should put shaders on. Should be able to find it a lot easier. Because it is fairly difficult to find one. Yeah, this might take a minute, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. I should be able to find one. Unless I just go to the other side of the ocean. See if I can fly to the other side. Maybe it will register during the spaces that I load in. Yeah, they usually do, and then they unfollow. Because it's probably a griefer. I don't got time for the jokes. As soon as I say it's not a PvP server, they will leave, so... I don't know why people like PvP servers so much. It's not like it's any fun in any case. Ah, there's one, but it's not the coral reef one. I gotta find it. Apparently it's quite rare to find it though, so We'll be very lucky if we see one. Get more space if you're running out of space. Unless if you're focusing on like 1 or 2 games, like me, if I like, because I only play like 2, 3 games, I literally only play like 3 games at most. I would focus on a screen. But if you're looking for space, like you in dire need of space, I'd rather go for the space. Can always get a second monitor on your birthday or for Christmas next year. Man, this thing's really tough to find. Anyone see it? Yeah, this thing is genuinely very tough to find, on my word. There's another one, but it's not the one that we're looking for. Ooh, it's almost nighttime. I can show you. Jason, there are new mobs in the game as well. Well, it's just retextured mobs. I'm about to show you the retextured mobs. This is hope I don't die. I don't want to die. So the lunge doesn't take as much durability. I think it takes no durability, but it does replace your hunger. Like it reduces your hunger by a lot. Makes you very hungry very quickly. Ooh, who was here? Bro, what? People were here? Interesting. Jason, how old are you, sir? I forget. Like 14? Are you 14? Oh, it's a little rabbit. Jason, I hope you're ready for this. You know the standard creeper, of course. It's a mid character. Get out of here, man. Very mid character, and then you get, if I can find it. I can't find it. Maybe I need to go to an area where it's been loading more. Oh, so you know about the husks, of course. But it's almost time for the big boys to show up. Oh yeah, there's those, the retextured skeletons. So that's a skeleton over there. Skeleton. Oh boy. Oh, I'm hungry. Ah, George. I can't find them. Oh, a job? Yeah. You'll love working. I'm going to a spot where I know they have spawned frequently. The unemployed community? Dude, that's funny. Let's see if I can find one here. As you can see, it's been it's been visited by a few people. So this should have a very high local difficulty. There. Dude, what do you think? What do you think? It's a zombie camel, bro. Look at it. Zombie camel. Yeah, zombie camel. I forgot what they call a husk, camel husk or something like that. But it's literally just a zombie camel. You can put a saddle on it and everything. And then you ride with your spear and you can just spear everything. Look at that. Look at them go. Any different? Over the fact that it's just a zombie. I think you feed it zombie flesh or something. Can't remember. But it's not breedable. But you can farm it. Yeah, these guys they're like a real menace. They are a real menace. Dude, the guys with the spears are hardcore. Is this a Philip? Please tell me this is a Philip. Hey, are you a Philip? You are not a Philip. You are not a Philip. Let me show you a Philip. And then I'm actually going to take a break. Brush your teeth. Smelly old man. There's no bed yet. Okay, pink it is. Pink bed it is. Let's go see if I can go find a Philip. Dude, this view is still by far one of the best. Like hands down to Callum and Onyx for creating that. I know Onyx build is not done yet, but it looks amazing so far. Looks really good. Let's see if we can find a Philip. Look at all these chickens! Sir, your car's extended warranty. Get out of my property. Is this a Philip? Please tell me this is a Philip. Hey Philip, you are not a Philip. Imposter! Philip? Is this a Philip? It's not a Philip, it's another imposter. Where's all the Philips, bro? Did they teleport back down underground? Wild if they did. Dude, no Philips whatsoever? What is going on here? I think I lost all the Philips. Oh, it's 10 PM? Yeah, I just thought he liked brushing his teeth. I have not. It's a Philip! Bro, what the fuck? No, speaking of Hogwarts Legacy, Chip actually brought it up, I think it was yesterday or today. It's like, dude, when are you gonna finish Hogwarts? I was like, yeah. I should probably do it like on a Saturday kind of buzz again. You know, like every Saturday is like a story game. Because there is this other game called Where Winds Meet. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I've yet to try it out though. So it should be good showcase game. One game I might have given up on is GTA. I spent so many hours on that game. Well, not that many hours, I mean, but the grind was too much. Oh, I need rockets. I'm gonna AFK. In actual fact, maybe I should take a break and come back later. How long have I been streaming for? This is like 4 or 5 hours, and I'll probably just call it for now. And then get back later. Because I have been playing for some time. $3 hours? But on that topic though, Carnage, with regarding the other games, I definitely do want to introduce it again. So I'm thinking I'll probably do it like on a Saturday again. Then I'll bring up a whole list of other games. I need to make my Discord more active. I'm not active enough on it. I genuinely need to be more active on it though. Anyways, I think I'm gonna call it for now, and then I'll catch you guys later. Not tomorrow though. I won't stream tomorrow, but thinking if the peeps are on tonight, then I'll stream. But if not, then I'll probably be back on Monday again. Anyways, thank you again everyone for stopping by though. You need to see Rachel. Dude, I literally almost forgot about Rachel. I can't believe, dude, nah. You are right. I will have to play Hogwarts Legacy so that we can go and have a look at everyone else. Because I mean, there was Draxi as well. We're probably gonna have to go and find you a character as well. We're gonna get a character for everyone. No, thank you, Carnage, and thank you everyone else for stopping by. Weedy and Emily, Jason, my word, my mind's blown by everyone. I'm gonna call it for now, and then I'll catch you guys on Monday, rather. Anyways, thank you so much for stopping by. I'll see you again. Take care.